This is the Montana Outdoor Podcast, brought to you in part by Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer in Missoula, home of Boss Snowplows, CM Truck Beds, and Diamond Sea Trailers. Just go to rmtte.com for more information. And by Superior Hardwoods of Montana, home of the largest selection of in-stock high-end wood products and flooring in the western United States. Let them guide you through the woods at superior-hardwoods.com. Now, get ready for more fascinating topics and the most interesting people you will ever find in Montana's great outdoors. We offer new podcasts most every Saturday. You can get a link to these podcasts by going to our website, montanooutdoor.com, or by going to our Facebook page, or just send an email to downrigger at montanooutdoor.com and say send a link to my email. It's that simple. Now let's head out with your host, Downrigger Dale, and see what's going on in Montana's great outdoors.
Welcome, everyone, and thanks again for all of you joining me. This has been such a great experience over the last couple of years. I cannot believe how this podcast has grown, and it's because of all of you. So be sure and subscribe and like, as they always say. I'm getting to be a real YouTuber now, where I'm actually saying all the lingo here, but it does help us a tremendous amount. So please do that. Also want to welcome in our active military. That's one of the things we are so honored here on our podcast here on the Montana Outdoor Podcast is how many active military all around the world tune into this podcast every week. And that really means a tremendous amount to all of us. And thanks for taking the time. And I hope these podcasts bring a little home back to you wherever you are. And thanks for your service. And speaking of which, also all you veterans out there, thank you for your service as well. Montana is proud to have so many veterans call Montana home. So thanks so much for being here. I'm excited about today's podcast. And that is because a lot of you know that, especially if you listen a lot, I grew up on a ranch. It was an incredible way to grow up. It was one of those things that I learned a lot, especially at the end of my ranching career, which was not by my choice, but unfortunately, the bottom of the cattle market fell out, and my dad had to sell out. And the day that they auctioned off all the cattle and equipment was a rough one, but it was one I will never forget as far as lessons learned and things. So I came across this new documentary that's coming out. I'm going to tell you, folks, you have to see this. You have to see this. And even if you're not in the farming and ranching industry, which a lot of our viewers are, it's going to hit home, especially anybody that hunts and fishes. This is going to hit home big time. It gets into, our access. It gets into everything, but it really gets into some of the true heroes of this state that we wouldn't be a state without farming and ranching. Still is a huge part of our economy, the biggest part of our economy. I want to bring in Tom. Now, I'm going to butcher your last name. Tell me your last name.
It's Opre, not to be confused with the grand old or that lady that sells all the books, because believe me, I've heard it all.
Yeah, okay. Tom Opre, he is the maker of this incredible documentary. It's called The Real Yellowstone, and I love the title. Because nowadays, everybody raves about the series Yellowstone, and it's a pretty cool series. A lot of people enjoy it. But this is the real Yellowstone. This talks about what really is going on out there. And some of it is kind of similar to, in some cases. You'll get what I'm saying when you watch the film. Tom, let's start with you, and then we're going to get into this incredible film that you've made. And you must be very proud of this, because this is just a great film. First, talk about yourself, how you got into being a filmmaker, and about your company as well.
I really appreciate it there. It's great to be here with your audience and all the folks at Montana Outdoor. Folks, this is Montana. I love it. I didn't grow up here, but I've been here most of my adult life. I think we're pushing on close to 30 years now. And my dad was an outdoor writer for 30 years. He wrote at Outdoor Life and Field and Stream as a monthly columnist. He was a newspaper writer back in the Midwest. And so I grew up, with a sportsman for a father, and, living in the Midwest in Michigan where we're at, there's great opportunities to hunt and fish. It's a sportsman's state. It's a sportsman's paradise in a lot of ways. But a lot of people on the land too. When I was coming out here as a kid, ever since I was knee high to somebody's britches, I've always wanted to be here in Montana. And I was really lucky to figure out in my business, a lot of kids want to follow in their father's footsteps, especially if they get along with them well. And I got along great with my dad. I thought maybe I'd be an outdoor writer too, but then I saw how much they got paid. And I was like, yeah, I don't know about that. So I decided to go into filmmaking. Actually, my dad had made some films back in the late 1960s and early 70s. They were going and fly-in camps in northern Ontario up by Hudson's Bay and catching these monster walleye and 40-inch northern pike. And I mean, just crazy stuff, and moose hunting. So, some really cool stuff. And so when I was a kid, I'd sneak into his office when he wasn't home, and I'd take that 16 millimeter film and put it in the projector. You had to get all the sprockets all lined up and have the take up reel and all that. Yeah, and there'd be these float planes kind of buzzing over the camera and stuff. And it's funny. So and that's really kind of what got me into this. I said, well, you know what? Maybe there's an opportunity. And my dad has a really good friend in the outdoor film business, a guy named Glenn Lau, who has since passed. But Glenn was one of the most iconic cutting edge filmmakers in the outdoor space. He did television commercials, national TV commercials for Rapala and Foxy Jigs and all this other stuff that you guys probably remember the Na commercial. I mean, it's like where you see this fish, this big largemouth's eye, and you see this little jig floating around, and the basically the jig is taunting the fish to catch it. And it won these things won Golden Lion Awards at Cannes for commercials. And so that guy was doing, he did a couple of television series. One was Sports Afield Television back in the 80s. And he was involved in American Sportsman with Kurt Gowdy and whatnot. And then when I graduated from college, I was in the auto industry, was there in Detroit, and they're taking a big dip. And I was like, well, there really wasn't any opportunities. And because my dad was the outdoor writer of the Free Press there in Detroit, he had 2 full pages on Sunday, 1.5 million subscribers. Now, folks, this is before the internet. This is, there is no email, there is no Facebook, there is no MySpace. It's just the newspaper every Sunday. And so he had a bully pulpit. And he really, he was a real advocate for hunting and conservation and our sportsmen and women and making sure our wildlife resources were taken care of. And he literally would take on governors. He would take on the director or the Secretary of Interior, in the 60s, 70s, 80s, into the early 90s when he finally retired from writing. So I grew up around that, and I was real interested in it, but I got involved in the film business, and I ended up moving down to Florida when Disney was doing MGM Studios was moving in, Universal Studios, because this fellow that was this Glenn Lau was living in Florida, and he says, why don't you come down here? Because there's a lot more opportunity. So I literally left Michigan, my home, with about $900 and a little S10 pickup truck with a capper on it, everything I owned, every gun I had, which wasn't very many. I think the shotgun and a rifle, a computer, a mattress, and some clothes. And that's how I started my career. And I was just really blessed to meet some really interesting people in the motion picture film industry. I ended up working on some feature films, and then did Shark Week for Discovery Channel with Jordan Klein Jr., who's become a great friend of mine. His dad recently passed, but his dad did Thunderball, James Bond, did Cocoon, Splash, and my buddy Jordan Jr., he was one of the kids in Splash. So, we did all this cool underwater stuff, a lot of stuff in Florida on the locations, but coming back, to the West has always been a lure. And I got here in the mid to late 90s, and I haven't left. And I've been really blessed. My wife and I are raising 4 kids here in the Flathead Valley, and I can't think of a better way for a kid to be raised than here in Montana. And then, spending that time here, being a sportsman and understanding, the first thing I learned when I got here was the gate rule. So you come up to a gate and the gate's closed, close it behind you. If you come up to the gate and it's open, leave it open. And the moral of the story or the theme is just leave it the way you found it. And that's just kind of how I've lived my life here. And I've been really blessed to meet some incredible Montanans here. Some of these people have been on the landscape, their families, for pushing 150 plus years now. And, salt to the earth, quality people. One of the things that just drove home for me how important this place is the people. And you can be walking out on a Forest Service road, or you can be out on the prairie going someplace, and if somebody drives by you, they always stop. Do you need some help? Everything okay? All that kind of stuff. And it's great. And of course, when I first got here, I ended up being in northern Lewis and Clark County. And I got to know, just on the southern boundary of the Bob Marshall Wilderness. And, I was bow hunting and doing stuff. Didn't have any real responsibilities. So I was hunting and fishing as much as possible. And then getting on a plane in Helena to fly out to do my business in the film side of things. And that's back when we had the speed limit was safe and prudent. And when I would pull into the airport in Helena, I'd leave my truck parked up on the curb there at the terminal with running. I walk in, get cameras and whatnot, check everything in, get back in the truck, go park it, come back a week or two later, and there'd be a little envelope on the windshield. And I'd have to write the days I was in. I'd put, I think it was $2 a day in cash in the envelope. And as you drove out of the parking lot, there was a steel pipe that somebody taken a torch and cut a slit in it, and you'd stick your money. It was all in the honor system.
Yeah.
That's what made Montana. And that's really still the foundation of most Montanans. It's the honesty, the ability to sit down and talk, work through things. And of course, since COVID, May of 2020, we didn't really shut down for COVID. And we have seen this huge influx, I would say a political migration of people that have come to Montana to live here. I guess my point is a lot of changes going on here in Montana. And so that's why, this film, the background I have and seeing what's going on. And I've been really blessed to be able to kind of travel around the world and do other film projects and be able to go hunting and fishing. Let's face it, since the beginning of time, I don't care what you believe in. I don't care about what your culture is, what your family history is, or what your politics, any of that stuff. One thing we all can agree on, we have been hunting since we've walked on 2 feet.
Without a doubt.
Exactly. And so but I realized there's this huge disconnect. Ever since the Great Depression, since the 1930s, people have been moving away from the land, been moving into the cities, becoming part of this urbanized society where, you have these people telling you how to live your life. And so I see this huge disconnect, and I'm like, well, wait a minute, what's going on here? Because when Teddy Roosevelt and George Bird Grinnell and Gifford Pinchot, these guys got together in the late 1800s, and they formed this club, right? The Boone and Crockett Club, which is now based in Missoula, right? And they ushered in this ethos of modern conservation, the wise use of a natural resource, which has allowed today for us to have birds in your bird feeder, deer and turkey in the backyard. The reason why we have our national forest is because of hunters who went hunting. That is the most important thing that people need to understand. But nobody understands this when we talk about this urbanized public. They don't have a clue even where their food comes from, let alone understanding what land stewardship and wildlife and habitat conservation is. So I ended up having a project I started in 2017. I gave a presentation to a group, about 80 or 90 other wildlife-centric, consumptive, hunting and sportsmen's groups from around the world, and about the impression that the broader public has on hunters and hunting. And it's not pretty. It's awful.
Yeah.
And just a case in point, any of your listeners, you want to understand what I'm really talking about, go to YouTube. Now, we all know that Google is the #1 search engine for the world, right? It's the biggest search engine there. But for millennials, which is now the largest segment of population in our country, their #1 search engine is YouTube. So go down to the search box down there at the end and type in animal kill shots. Just do it. First time I did it, Dale, it brought me to tears. It was unbelievable what we were showing to people. And again, what I try to make our sportsmen understand, I get what it takes. You've been climbing a mountain to get a sheep or an elk or a big mule deer. You spent all the money, you saved it all up and went on a hunt someplace abroad. Or you drew this awesome tag and you were able to go hunt in some other state or even here in Montana, and you got a phenomenally old animal that has just this incredible characteristics that you can put it in a record book if that's what you wanted to do. But what I've really come to understand, people don't really, it's not even an acceptance thing. They just have no clue. So when you're sitting there holding this dead animal, and maybe there's a little blood on it, maybe not, you got a big smile on your face, a big grin, right? We call it the grip and grin. Well, at the end of the day, unfortunately, what we've been able to find through our research is that the broader public looks at you as, you don't look any different than a ISIS terrorist in Syria who's cutting off the head of a human being. And so that disconnect is real, folks. And I'm not saying, hey, you shouldn't post these pictures and stuff, but I think we call it respect now. It's like, hey, if we're going to post anything, it absolutely has to show the utmost respect towards that animal, because unfortunately, we have a lot of stuff that gets put out there in the mainstream media that just doesn't really work very well, and because of that, we're in the crosshairs. For instance, these folks out there, because they don't understand what's going on, they think that maybe what you're doing is disrespectful to animals. We talk a lot about record books. We talk a lot about inches on a ruler. And so that really comes across as being very self-centered, very egotistical to these people. Again, remind me, guys, I'm just the messenger here, right? I'm not saying, that you guys are terrible, but we do have a segment of hunters out there that are really good at getting information out. They have a platform, they have an audience. But guys, you got to be really careful with that, because it's a really special thing. And we have to make sure all sportsmen and women have to make sure that they're putting the right information out there in the public. Because now with these iPhones, literally in a nanosecond, you can post a picture anywhere where you have cell service. Anybody in the world can see that. And if that picture does not epitomize why we hunt, which we can talk about that, but why we hunt, then, we're in big trouble, folks. Because the one thing that most of us don't realize, and we've done the research, only 4% of the U.S. population buys a hunting license in any given year. That's U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service data. And it's not growing by any means. Yeah, we saw a little bump during COVID, but it's not growing, folks. We have this disconnect. We have these people live in cities. When they wake up in the morning, the next decision, is it a chai latte or a caramel macchiato? That's how they live their lives. Whereas us Montanans, we go into, City Brew or, go to one of our local coffee shops or whatever, but usually they're open at 5:00 in the morning and we're heading out to go fishing or hunting, right? Or we're helping out our ranching friends, sorting cattle, or going to a Brandon or, doing whatever we can to be connected to the land. So, that disconnect we have out there caused me, along with a bunch of other wildlife photographers and outdoor filmmakers who all believe in sustainable use, all believe in our North American conservation, which I call modern conservation. It's a little bit of a better mouthful, where hunting is its main tenet or tool. We believe that we need to educate that urban population. Again, only 4% of us buy a hunting license, and we're seeing the politicization of hunting and conservation in every political cycle. Even if you take that 4% down, let's just say it's 10%. That means every time we have a political situation, something that's coming down to a vote, we are 40% plus one vote behind every time. Now, I don't know about you guys, but 40% that's a pretty big barrier to overcome. And so that's why it's so important that we get the right messages out there from the right messengers. And so we've done the focus group research. Other people have done it too. But we know in America today that between 60 and 80% of the population, that's 60, 70, 75, maybe 80 in certain parts of the country, are okay with hunting as long as it's done for the right reasons. Now, the number one reason, consumption, right? And so we have this disconnect in politics in our urban society, and we're a little itty bitty minority, just like our farmers and ranchers. Less than 5% of the U.S. population are farmers and ranchers. Okay, so now we have this issue and we see the politics of it. Okay, well, we better figure out how to get a whole bunch of people on our side. And that's why we formed the Shepherds of Wildlife Society. It's I almost say it's a benign entity. Our mission is simple: reconnect our modern urbanized society with nature. And let's get a social buy-in or social acceptance of our modern conservation model, with hunting being its main tenet or tool. I don't have to apologize for anything, because like I said earlier, there's a reason why we have all this wonderful wildlife around our continent, why we have this wonderful public lands in which we fought for here lately. And so at the end of the day, we have to educate those people. Every sportsman and woman needs to be telling people these stories. And so I said, what am I good at? I've done really well doing high-end national TV commercials. I've done a lot of stuff for the auto industry. I've done stuff for Sea-Doo Watercraft. I used to be the voice of Warren the Winch Company. I've done commercials for Matthews. I've done for Federal Cartridge. I've done stuff for Abu Garcia, Fireline, a lot of different stuff over the years. But, I kept looking and thinking about things. What is our legacy? Are we going to leave this place better than we found it? Are our kids going to be able to go hunting and fishing and see the things, or maybe more, around the world. And I can tell you with that 8.1 billion humans, we got less and less wildlife habitat. We're fractionalizing our country here in the United States. We're seeing all kinds of things happen, say with wild turkeys. I did a whole bunch of stuff with Mike Chamberlain, the wild turkey doc earlier the last few years about all the different subspecies of wild turkey here in the continental U.S. And man, there's threats everywhere. Predation. We don't have anybody trapping anymore. And of course, we got more and more development issues going on right here in Montana. And we're seeing that because of all these people moving here. So I started the first film. When I gave that presentation, I had a guy come up to me and start talking to me from Zambia, and I didn't quite understand what he was saying at first. It took me a while to understand his Zambian accent, but this white guy came to me. He was in the professional hunting industry, and he was telling me this story about this crazy story about this chief, this woman who came to his business, and she said, "I heard you were honest, and my people are starving to death, and no one's here to help me. Can you come help me?" And that turned into 3 years of me traveling over to Zambia right through COVID when I could travel and telling this incredible story about this family that got together. They were professional hunters and they helped out the community. None of this was charity. It was all about helping and giving them the first couple rungs up the ladder of prosperity. Kids were starving to death when I first got there. Now they have schools, they have food, and the wildlife populations were being decimated by not only subsistence poaching, people just trying to survive, but also what we call bushmeat poaching, which is a $2 billion black market industry, according to the UN in Africa. They've literally taken out 20-some thousand wire snares out of the area. But the wildlife populations exploded. They now have hunting, and the people are happy. And there was all kinds of things that occurred. So if anybody wants to watch it, you can go to our website. It's on there. It's called Killing the Shepherd. It won all kinds of awards. And one of the most interesting things, Dale, is that film started winning awards for social justice, indigenous, and human rights. Now, if you had asked me 6 months before that film came out if I thought I was a human rights advocate, I guarantee I would have laughed at you. Yeah. But here's the deal, right? We all know what the definition of insanity is, right? Keep doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. Well, I got news for you. That is what the hunting and conservation community has been doing for decades. At the end of the day, we just do a shitty job of communicating about what we do, but we win these awards for human rights. And I'm like, okay. All right. And I ended up doing a screening with Bruce Westerman's Western Caucus. Bruce is the chair. At the time, he wasn't the ranking. He was the ranking Republican in Natural Resources in Congress. He's out of Arkansas, super nice guy. And he says, "Hey, I want you to come to the Capitol and screen this film." So I ended up screening with a couple hundred people in the Capitol. And he introduced me as the preeminent expert in all things wildlife conservation and human rights. And, it's really just kind of brought home to me that if what we're saying and what we're doing isn't resonating with the broader public, and we know we're on the chopping block. I mean, I didn't even get into IP3 in Oregon. I don't know if you've heard of that, but that's a ballot initiative, which we can have here in Montana, right? And a ballot initiative that would make it an automatic felony to harm any animal, wild or domestic. Now, it sounds crazy, right? Okay, but this is Oregon, right? We see these people that come over here from Portland, to go ahead and campaign for various folks. They're sitting on the corner in front of the grocery store, and they're going up to people going, "Do you believe in bestiality?" No? Sign here. What? Yep. And again, you just got to get enough signatures, and it goes on the ballot. They weren't able to do it this last go around, but you go to their website. Go look it up, IP3 in Oregon. And they tell you they want to get this thing passed in Oregon. They want to take it to Delaware and Massachusetts. Then they want to take it to Illinois. Then they want to take it to California. Well, what do all those states have in common? They're run by people that are that don't like hunting, don't like the modern conservation model. So it's a real threat out there. And at the end of the day, okay, all right, well, we got to change what we're saying here to people. Okay, well, the obvious thing here is we talked about this incredible wildlife management model we have. It's the North American or modern conservation model. It's the greatest model human beings have devised for wildlife conservation and habitat conservation in our history and our existence. The real Yellowstone with ranchers and farmers and people that are the stewards of their land. It's that value they get from that wildlife resource. Because let's face it, folks, as a species, we don't have a very good track record of taking care of things unless it does provide benefit. If the people that live with the wildlife see a benefit, they will take care of it. They'll take care of that land. Because let's face it, if we don't take care of the land and we don't have good, healthy habitat, then we won't sit around here and argue about you're going to pull a trigger or not, because nothing's going to exist. And there's all kinds of places around the world where there's no wildlife, or very little, for a lot of reasons. And so that's what formed us. We formed the Shepherds of Wildlife Society. We looked at what was going on, what we needed to do. And so I started this film, Killing the Shepherd, won all these awards. And then while I was working on that, and even let's back up a little bit, 2014, 2015, Cecil the Lion, some stuff. My wife is a real serious huntress, and she's been blessed to be able to hunt all over the world and do stuff. Probably half of it or more of it before we even got married. And then we ended up doing a lot together over the last 10, 15 years. And she's been recognized that. She was Mrs. Nebraska in 2003. She used to work for Cabela's. She was Mary and Dick Cabela's personal assistant for about 5 years. And so she won that beauty pageant. But to be in the Mrs. campaigns, you have to have some sort of cause you celebrate. Well, her cause was the hunter conservationist. And so it was a really unique deal, because by having that sash and that crown, she ended up, I'm sure a lot of your viewers have seen her on television, Olivia Opre. She's done Federal Dangerous Game. She's done the Beretta shows, the Ruger shows, whatever. And then we even did a show. We did a film that we let the folks at Gunworks cut into a show about the conservation of Marco Polo sheep in Kyrgyzstan. And she runs into people, it seems like every week, saying, "Hey, I saw you on television." Aaron Davidson's been running that thing about 1,000 billion times now. But yeah, it's a great show. But she's really glommed onto that. But because of that, when we started to have the situation with Cecil the Lion and some of the other women huntresses that have traveled abroad and maybe hunting lions and things like that, and when that stuff gets posted online, it created this huge uproar. And of course, my wife was ground zero on this stuff, and I was by fact of being her husband. And literally, we were fielding tens of thousands, well, I say tens, but thousands of death threats and comments about people on social media wanting to kill my wife, cut her head off, and do terrible things, to kill our children, skin them out, hang them on their walls. And this is all coming from this urban society. It's coming from people who live in cities in America. It's coming from people who live in Madrid. It's coming from people who live in London. It's coming from a lot of different places where people are completely disconnected with nature, but they're threatening our lives. As a matter of fact, the Animal Liberation Front, ALF, according to the FBI, one of the 10 most dangerous domestic terrorism outfits here in America today, put a $50,000 bounty on my wife, found a picture of her when she was hunting with an animal, and posted our physical home address. Lucky for us, it was the one that we lived in prior to the house we live in today. But still, I had to call up the people that are living there and say, "Hey, I hope nobody shoots at you, because it's right off the road, right? Or you get firebombed or something." But they put a bounty on my wife's life. And so anywhere my wife goes, if she's billed as somebody to talk at a safari club convention or whatever it is, or some dinner or whatever, she's packing heat, because you just don't know. It just takes one nut job. But that's what really propagated me to look at this and go, why? I mean, this isn't even a hunting thing, right? This is a human societal norm thing. I mean, is it okay to go ahead and ostracize people because they're doing something that humans have been doing for a long, long time, thousands and thousands of years? I mean, we've been hunting as long as we've been breathing and sleeping and, defecating. So at the end of the day, why do we have this problem? And so what we came to understand is that if we could give a voice to rural people, those stewards of the land, and we've done focus group research, we know it's super impactful. The film, and we just got the research done on the film in Africa. We asked people, and our demographics for this was 60-40 women to men, city only, suburban city people only, no rural people, nobody who's strongly for or against hunting. And we found out, we asked them, do you think hunting is a form of conservation? Only 3% of the people felt they strongly agreed with that statement.
Really?
Yeah, only 3%. So after they watched the film, that 3% went to 33%. And when you added the strongly agree at 33 with agree, we were at 77%. Now, I talked earlier about the Teddy Roosevelt conservation. I'm sorry, folks. It's a wonderful idea, but it's dead with the this urban class. They could care less about the billions of dollars we raise for, economically for conservation. They could care less about the millions of acres we've saved and all the things we've done in conservation with wildlife habitat. They don't care about the millions of animals we brought back. It goes right over the head. It's all about the warm and fuzzy. It's all about emotions.
Right.
And
we
asked them, do you feel that well-regulated hunting, illegal hunting, as a form of conservation Can it allow for these rural people to see their most basic human rights? So a good paying job, access to healthcare, an opportunity for your kids to get an education. 10% of the people agreed with that statement strongly before they watched the film. After they watched the film, one time, 10% went to 47%. And when you added 40% strongly agree with agree, we were at 90%. So folks, if you're a hunter, if you're a fisherman, stop talking about all the money we raise and even the science. I mean, yeah, we have to have science in order to make educated decisions. Sure. Our scientists are very well trusted. They do wonderful stuff as long as it's peer reviewed and not being paid by an anti-use group to create propaganda. But at the end of the day, science is king. And so we have to make educated decisions based on what our scientists tell us. And so it's really important, but it means absolutely nothing to that suburban housewife who votes. So let's talk about your cultural rights. Let's talk about your civil rights. You know, we talked about Grinnell and Roosevelt and Pinchot and others like them. Well, we've been doing this for about 130 years now, from what I can tell. And we've been doing a pretty dang good job of it. It isn't perfect, folks, but it's pretty good. You have birds out there. Yeah. We've got raptors. We've got fisheries. And the thing is our founding fathers were so smart. Now, they were smart, but they weren't smart. They were smart because they made sure we had the Second Amendment. So having a firearm, that allows you to go out and harvest game, go out and hunt. But they didn't, in their wildest dreams, ever think that they'd have to make hunting a right, because it's for food, right? But now we live in a society, we live in a country where I go to these people and I'll say to hunters, hey, maybe you should be careful about this, maybe not post that. And they look at me and I go, it's my right. I can do anything I want to. And I'm like, no, it isn't. Yes, it is. It's my right. Damn it. Da, 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 da. And I'm like, okay, show me in the U.S. Constitution or the Bill of Rights where the right to hunting is there. Show it to me. You can't. Now, it may be a God-given right, but at the end of the day, it is not a legal right. We get to hunt because the other 90% of the population, in many cases, grudgingly allow us. Hunting is a privilege, okay? And if you don't understand that, stop hunting. Because at the end of the day, what you do reflects on all of us. So when I did that presentation back in 2016 that I talked about, where I met the guy from Zambia, I did a Google search and looked at, our outdoor television, and I looked at outdoor television host game violations or poaching. And you go Google that someday, folks, and you will see a long list, a laundry list of people that you all have heard if you've watched 10 hours of outdoor television in the last 10 years. So I don't know about you all, but what industry, what business would be paying people to sponsor them if, let's say, you're a gun guy and you've got gun violations? Is the NRA going to pay you to come promote the NRA when you're a known criminal with guns? Yet in the hunting community, we look at these people and go, wow, I want to be just like them. And I'm like, what are you guys talking about? These are the people. And again, and some of these people I know. And the reality is it sucks. But sometimes, you just have to look at this and say, hey, at the end of the day, we are only as good, like me, I'm only as good as my last movie. Nobody remembers the one I did 20 years ago. And, and so at the end of the day, we just have to do a better job of how we talk about hunting, how we showcase what we do as hunting. And it's as simple as even our photos that we take, just doing it in a way that's very respectful. And again, why do we go hunting? And this is a really cool thing. So because of my blessed growing up with an outdoor writer for a father, back in 1980, when he was at the newspaper in Detroit, he did a survey. And of course, the survey, he's got 2 full pages. The survey was up against the gutter, the seam of the paper there when you opened it up. So you had to cut it out. You had to write your name and address on the top of it. And then he had 10 reasons. You had to rank them 1 through 10. And then you had to go ahead and put it in your own envelope. You had to address it to my dad at the paper. You had to lick the stamp because they didn't have self-adhesive stamps back then. And then you had to walk down to the mailbox and send it to my dad at the paper. So who in the world would ever respond to this, right? Well, Dale, I can tell you, over 40,000 people responded. And so for weeks on end, my little brother, my mom, and I, after school was done and homework was done, we sat in the living room floor tallying these things. I remember I remember like it was yesterday. But I can tell you, Dale, where did killing an animal fall into the top 10? It was like 7 or 8. But number 2 was to spend time in the outdoors. Number 1 was to spend time in the outdoors with friends and family. That was the most important thing. And that hasn't changed in the last 40 years. Okay. We all want to spend those traditions in the outdoors, opening day, whatever the season is, a fishing season, going to the ranch and visiting with our friends that we've become friends with for over years, because we had the same ideals, the same beliefs, the same value system. And so we find my kids, we're out there. I mean, sometimes I'm out spraying weeds, and I hate spraying weeds. But you know what? If that gives my kids a chance to go out and access land, you got to do it. It's important to build those relationships.
Tom, you might have heard that little bark in the background. That's my furry little director who's letting me know we got to take a quick break here. But and speaking of which, we're talking about all these great things. And
we're leading up to the real Yellowstone.
Yeah. And conservation and all that. This sponsor, Superior Hardwoods of Montana, does these incredible things where they will take an old granary, an old factory, an old homestead, and they will turn that wood into something that ends up in your house. You're putting this piece of history in your house on the floor, paneling. It's amazing what these guys do. And that's why they have become like the best in the world with this. We're honored to have them as a sponsor. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about this. And then when we come back, we're going to get into talking about this incredible film, The Real Yellowstone. And it covers so many of the things that Tom just talked about, but it covers it in a way that is going to sink into you like you can't believe. And it really says some of the things that used to bug me when people would say, hunting, you're not a conservationist. Yeah, we are the reason. In fact, we pay for it. Not only with our enthusiasm in that, but with our hard-earned dollars too. But yeah, the understanding that and the fact that we interface with farmers and ranchers, sometimes it just kills me where we see this disconnect, even within us here in Montana, of the owner of that land, the farmer, and us wanting access to it. And we're going to cover a lot of this. This film really touches on some key things that you tell me about in your emails all the time. So stick around. We'll be back right after this. You know, they say they don't make them like they used to, but at Superior Hardwoods of Montana, that's kind of the whole point. This isn't just a lumber yard. We're talking about 11 acres of reclaimed wood. Wall paneling, flooring, trim, beams, slabs, you name it. Every single piece has a story behind it. Old barns, historic homesteads, long-forgotten factories. This wood has been places, and now it can be part of your story too. Maybe you're building a home, remodeling a room, or just putting together that dream project you've had on the back burner. Superior Hardwoods of Montana can help bring it to life. They can even custom mill it to fit your exact vision, because real craftsmanship never goes out of style. And here's the thing, you're not just getting character and beauty when you choose reclaimed wood, you're reclaiming American history. You're giving something old a brand new chapter with values that never go out of style. Reduce, reuse, recycle. Whether you're a contractor, a weekend DIYer, or someone who just loves a one-of-a-kind piece of wood, Superior Hardwoods is open to the public and ready to help. Exotic woods, live-edge slabs, pre-finished and unfinished flooring, it's all in stock and ready to go. Need help picking out the right material? Just ask. Their team has been doing it since 1977, and they know how to guide you through the woods, literally and figuratively. Swing by their beautiful showroom at 5120 Highway 93 South in Missoula, or check them out online at superior-hardwoods.com. I promise you, you'll leave inspired. That's Superior Hardwoods of Montana. Local, knowledgeable, family-run, and ready to help you build something that lasts. Let them help guide you through the woods at superior-hardwoods.com. Superior Hardwoods of Montana. Go see them. We are back here on the Montana Outdoor Podcast. My guest, as you know, is Tom Opre, and Tom has created he's created a lot of great films in his career. This one, I just think is Tom, some of your best work ever. And that says a lot because you've done amazing things, but this really is something. So what I wanted to do, Tom, is I wanted to play, there's a few different trailers that are out there about the movie, but I wanted to play this trailer, and it starts out with these great old photos from way back in Montana. And you learn that some of these ranchers, the generations have been working the land for a long time. And you can hear the passion in their voice because they feel this change that they didn't want to bring about. Set this up a little bit for us. Talk about this.
Yeah, getting back to why we're doing this, right? In Montana, we got families that have been here a long time. They just happen to have ancestors that blood, sweat, and tears, were able to dig out a life on this land. And, you got people that look at it, go, oh, wow, look, they got a whole bunch of elk on their ranch, or they got a bunch of birds on their ranch, or they got access to the water, to the river. Well, I'd like to have that too. But, what I come to understand over 30 years is you build relationships up with people. You get to be friends with them. And there's all kinds of opportunities. And of course, now here in Montana, we'll talk about this more, but we've got this whole world of how can we utilize the resource that, the ranchers to benefit? How can the public hunter utilize the resources for their own enjoyment? And there's a lot of conflict. I mean, this film is full of tension. Because yes. Montana is full of tension. And like I said earlier, when you add all these people that just moved here, they all want to go hunting and fishing too, because the vast majority of them, as we saw in the last 2 election cycles, are center right. Mm-hmm. They've completely changed their politics. I mean, let's face it, folks, Montana's never been center right like this. I think maybe 1885 or 1890, but ever since we got all these miners here and, down in Anaconda and Butte and Helena, they were all unionized and they all voted left of center. And so Montana's been, we all see it, we usually pretty good mix. And that was one of the other things too about Montana. We're pretty good about, hey, when we used to vote on candidates, we voted on the candidate because we knew them. Right. We didn't vote on party. Yeah. But now that
we're one of the last states that still does
exactly.
that.
And so now we're back to a point now where it's like, well, who is this guy or who is this gal? And they're a Republican or they're a Democrat or they're a Libertarian. Okay, that's okay. All the people on that, let's vote for it. And that's a discipline. Again, that's getting back. Obviously we have a speed limit now. The federal government forced it on us, but yeah. A lot of other things out there have changed. But change is constant. And that's what's going on. And so this film is about trying to explain to people, our audience is the city people, around America, but it's also for Montanans. It's also for our sportsmen and women. So they understand the impacts that they make on people. I have seen people that are in positions of leadership for some of these sportsmen's conservation groups. I'm not going to name any names, but I literally have seen them post saying, hey, if you vote for somebody with an R next to your name, you're not a wildlife and habitat conservationist. Shame on you. Yeah. 4% of our population buys in the United States buys a hunting license. Montana, I think we're around 17%, somewhere in that neighborhood. It's come down in the last 10 years. We're at over 20, 22, 23%. We don't need any more division within the hunting ranks. Okay, folks? I don't care if you want, we got people that don't like other hunters, hunters that don't like other hunters because you hunt behind a fence higher than 3.5 feet tall. Maybe, as long as it's fair chase, I get it. But at the end of the day, we got people out there complaining about you hunt with modern archery tackle or dogs or whatever it is. You hunt on public versus private. You get these companies that sell hunting products that have their own tribes. And so you create this tribalism and it's us versus them, and it's like, and I see this disconnect that we have within our own hunting community, our own sportsmen and women, and that we don't need that because we have way more in common with each other than we do with the people at PETA and the Humane Society and Center for Biological Diversity, where, folks, let's face it, you may not know this, but if you look at their 990 tax returns for all those anti-use, anti-hunting groups, which is all on the IRS website, you can go look them up. They collect about $1 billion, $1 billion with a B, every year in donations from people in the cities who don't know what they're paying for. And not a single dollar of that goes towards conservation, the wise use of natural resources. It pays for an army of Armani wearing suits with $500 haircut lobbyist attorneys to go fight against conservation and our way of life and our traditions. So if you want to divide, man, who's ever read The Art of The Art of War? Divide and conquer. Well, we divide ourselves all the time, and part of it is in our DNA. And I say this, Dale, because I firmly believe that for a long time, I call it the fishing hole syndrome. I'm not going to take you to my fishing hole because you might come back and fish it. And so we have a tendency to kind of be protective of our turf and stuff like that. Yeah. But when it comes to our hunting community, our hunting companies and our hunting organizations, they don't play very well because it's kind of all for me and all for me. Instead of, hey, wait a minute, we're a little minority. We shouldn't worry about competing with each other because at the end of the day, look at the public land we have here in Montana. We've got a ton of it. Now there's a lot of pressure on it. Of course, look at the amount of private ground where wildlife, like I like to tell a lot of these city people, wildlife doesn't live in your cities, right? And it doesn't even live on the tops of mountains in Montana most of the year because they're covered in snow and ice. It lives on fertile ground. And it's that fertile ground that people live on that have to see a benefit. And if they don't see a benefit to it, then it's all going to go the way of the dodo bird. That's just reality. Yeah. And there's plenty of history of us where we got plenty of examples in human history of that. But so ranching, farming, wildlife is on that landscape. We have these scenarios where wildlife, the Seaman Livestock Company south of Cascade, I was working with Cooper Hibbert on this incredible family, incredible stewards of their land and the wildlife. And of course, they've done such a good job that now there's a whole bunch of unintended consequences, right? Part of the Devil's Kitchen, they've got this management. Chase Hibbert started a management program working with the state and other landowners and other stakeholders. And they literally, he says, let's have bull elk die of old age. Okay, well, that means you can't shoot them all, right? And so at the end of the day, over the last, maybe almost 4 decades now, this Devil's Kitchen agreement, I mean, it's unbelievable. I have seen herds in the wintertime of, 200, 300, 400 mature bull elk roaming around. Now, of course, those bull elk drop their antlers, right? Come mid-November, late November. Or not November, March. And then all of a sudden there's this craze over antlers. Everybody wants to get one. And of course the value, there's tens of thousands of dollars worth of antler out there on the ground. And of course, now you got people that are coming in at night, trespassing. You got people doing all kinds of dastardly things. I mean, I ended up interviewing a really super nice guy in Helena that was one of a major league antler collector. And he's telling me that, even housewives will break every law in the book in order to get a monster bull antler shed. And so we got to be careful here, folks, because at the end of the day, there's ramifications to all this. And I think part of why we did the film, not only for that urban public, was also to educate our resident hunters and sportsmen and women. And of course, Montana is not a rural country anymore. No people live in cities here. That's where the majority of people are. They live in Missoula and Billings and Bozeman, and I'll talk about Bozeman in a song we wrote for the film. But there's a Great Falls and Helena and the Flathead Valley. We're way over 100,000 people living here. There's not enough places for people to live, and now we got apartment complexes popping up. And of course, we've got all kinds of wildlife here too. And now I'm pretty sure we're ground zero for human wildlife conflict in our state. There's probably more conflict in my backyard here than there is in all the other counties in the state. So a lot of this we got to figure out some solutions to a lot of these things. But the key thing, and it's probably the most important aspect of this film for Montanans, is watch it. Have an open mind, and it will propel you into a trajectory to discuss these things, to sit down around a table, because that's really what we need to do. And that's one thing that we've all done pretty good in Montana is that we, even if we disagree, we usually have similar outcomes we want. We just have to figure out how to get there. And there's a little bit of give and take. And there's been a lot of great situations and examples where Montanans have sat down across the table and worked out. I mean, people even diametrically opposed to each other. Maybe not PETA in the Humane Society, but a lot of our other groups, they kind of figure it out. And, and this stuff's not hard. It's just, you got to sit down, roll up your sleeves. And in the film, we have a rancher over on the far side of Montana, outside of Hinsdale by Malta, Glasgow area, a guy named Eric. Albus, and he's a rancher, farmer, and an outfitter. He's got an outfit called Milk River Outfitters. A lot of people probably heard of it. Just he was involved in the whole monster buck stuff with Bill Jordan of Realtree back in the day in the 90s, early 2000s. Mm-hmm. And so back when the Milk River was covered up with whitetails, which obviously it isn't anymore due to disease. But Eric was so worried about the future that he agreed to run for office last year. Matter of fact, I think I was the first person after his wife to find out that he was running. And so we kind of followed his campaign and what he was doing. Of course, access was a big issue, making sure landowners see some sort of, value to having the wildlife. Because let's face it, I mean, if the wildlife's not on public land and it's on private land, there's only two places to be. And if it's on private land, then the fellow who's put fertilizer out there or irrigating or whatever else. I mean, the Sieben Livestock Company, Cooper Hibbard, explained to me early on when we started production that when things dry out in late July, early August on the mountains around where they are, south of Cascade, the elk just come into their irrigated hayfields by the tune of upwards of 2,000 elk a night. Yeah. Come in traveling 7 miles away. They track them, and that's their second cutting. It's the most important hay crop they have. It's the most important hay crop for every rancher and farmer if they're haying. And so they figured conservatively that they were losing between $80,000 and $150,000 worth of hay. That's real. And so, and at the end of the day, there's all these issues about, okay, well, this landowner, should they be able to realize a benefit from feeding the wildlife? We got Randy Newberg in the film. A lot of guys, I'm sure, have heard of Randy, Fresh Tracks and a big proponent of public lands and access. And, what Randy and I had some pretty interesting discussions, but, he's also a CPA. He's real about things. And he's like, hey, yeah, he says in the film, they're feeding the public's resource, the public, this public asset. What are we going to do here? Do they need to get a value? So again, remember, guys, I'm the messenger. I'm not expressing my personal opinions on any of this. My goal is just to give you guys the information so that you can make a well-educated decision. I am a second-generation journalist. I firmly believe in being very balanced, having lots of opposing viewpoints, because the more viewpoints we have, the more information we input into the equation, the better results we get at the end.
Yeah. And you bring up a really great point in that for all of you hunters and anglers out there that write me email after email about how we're going to get more access and can you do more things about that. And then farmers and ranchers, they have their issues. And you make this great point about we better get together on all this because there are very large, very well-funded groups that don't want the farmer and rancher to do what they do anymore, and they sure as hell don't want you to hunt or fish anymore. And we better get this together and realize we're in the same boat. Let's watch this.
We've been here in Montana since the mid-1800s.
It's our history, it's our heritage, it's our family.
The good old American spirit is still here, working and, being a part of this land.
The goal of American Prairie is pretty simple. We're trying to build the largest nature reserve in America and completely open everything to the public.
They call it rewilding the land. It's a very easy thing for them to sell because it sounds like they're doing a good thing, unless you're one of the people that they're trying to rewild.
The idea that animals belong to everybody is different than the idea of my property belongs to me.
The reality is in Montana, there's a lot of private land and there's a lot of people who don't provide any access to that private land.
They wanted to buy our land, change our traditions, and disregard our communities.
Everybody knows that we're in the land acquisition business. We're very transparent about that.
You're affecting people's families that have been ranching on those lands for hundreds of years now.
Last year, the elk coming down in our hayfield ate the equivalent of $150,000 worth of hay.
They recover that cost through leasing to an outfitter or charging a trespass fee. And they get yelled at, oh, you're commercializing the public's wildlife. Are they, or are they just recovering some of the costs associated with the public's wildlife?
Production agriculture is what provides the economy for central Montana.
What we're doing here is producing the cleanest food in the entire world.
Like you can taste the sunshine in the grass.
Without agriculture, the production of food, you cannot have a city, you cannot have any business, you cannot have a bank. It's the basis.
When American Prairie Reserve buys a place, I view it as a death in the community.
The last 150 years, it's been the producers here developing those grasslands.
We've created this ecological resilience from the soil up. It works.
You can raise food totally in sync with nature.
We're seeing animals that have never been on the prairie before return. Those are our indicators of success. We're seeing that ecosystem restored.
I don't know that I have the right to choose what should or shouldn't be here based on what's convenient for me.
You can never take the human out of a conversation about conservation. This is all deeply connected.
A lot of ranches are barely hanging on as it is.
Everybody that's coming into this area is driving the price of land through the roof.
And, then there were a lot of cattle in danger. Finally, the fire was going to overtake us, and so we took off. And
The Real Yellowstone digital cinema event premieres July 15th. Visit shepherdsofwildlife.org for more information.
Wow, Tom, that I love how the trailer really builds at the end to this is all coming to. There's a lot of people wanting a slice of this pie, and for these families, you talk to a lot of these families for generations have been into it. In fact, we'll play another clip here in a bit about some that are deeply concerned that their livelihood is going to be pulled away from them. What was that like did you expect that you were going to be hearing these kind of things from these farmers and ranchers? Did you realize that how deeply concerned some of them were?
Yeah, I mean, let's face it, folks. These farmers and ranchers, a lot of them will tell you the poorest set of multi-millionaires in the country. They're land rich, cash poor, and they're working long hours, hard work, difficult conditions. Could be really cold, below zero, freezing conditions. Can be super hot. We're dealing with drought. We're dealing with grasshopper plagues. One family, the Lewis Brown family out of Big Sandy, they were looking at basically giving up after 100 plus years. They had 3 kids, 2 daughters that weren't really interested in running the ranch. Their son wanted to run the ranch, but she married a young nursing student at MSU down in Bozeman, city girl. And they knew they farm, they ranch, they got a herd of cattle, and they run a little outfitting business. And they realized that there was a good chance, and they had taken on, they had a sister, one of the original kids in the family wanted to get bought out, and they had bought the neighbor's acreage next to them because the fella had passed away, and bought the land because they knew would be a good asset for them. But then they had a drought, they had 3 years of drought with hopper plagues, and they had this son that, what's the recipe for disaster and divorce? Having to work 8 days a week, 80 hours a week, no vacations or anything like that. I mean, that's pretty indicative of most ranchers and farmers. They're married to their land. And so they decided to put it up for sale. And, the neighbor, which was Lewis, was the Brown's best friend, had sold his ranch for a pretty good penny. And of course, real estate prices right now are about as good as they've ever been in the history of our state. Yep. And they thought, well, maybe this is an exit strategy. Who are they going to sell to? And they ended up getting an offer from American Prairie. And they didn't believe in American Prairie's stated mission. And so they turned down the offer. And interesting enough, they're right there in the edge of the break country there in the monument. And they had a archaeologist out there, and he was out digging around, and he found a dinosaur bone. It ended up being a complete intact dinosaur. I forget what the species of the dinosaur, but it's like the next level down below Tyrannosaurus Rex. So it's a predator, right? Yeah. But they found the entire thing, and it's only like the second one they've ever found in the world. And he ended up taking that thing out, and they sold it in Sotheby's for millions and millions of dollars. Now, the ranching family got a little percentage of it, but that little percentage was what allowed them to stay on their ranch. That's what allowed them get off the market. At the end of the day, people just have to understand these ranchers are just like all of us. They have to live on a budget. If you're a cow-calf operator, hey folks, I want you to understand how would you live your life if you only got paid once a year? One time a year, and they get paid, all year long. They're taking care of this cattle. They calve them, take care of them. In the fall, they start sorting and they ship. And when they get to the stockyards, they weigh them. Now, after they travel, they lose weight. And whatever the market is dictates what they get paid. And then they get a check, and they have to live on that one check until the next year they get the next check. That's what a cow-calf operator does. And again, they're the stewards of their land. They got to take care of it. They got to build fence. I don't know if anybody's built fence these days, but most people are telling me it costs between $30,000 and $40,000 a mile to get it produced and put in the ground. And then you got places like we start the film off in the Remington fire there in southeastern Montana, south of Barney. Started in Wyoming, burned almost 200,000 acres in about 2.5 days. People lost everything, not only their livestock, but when you lose all your grass, and you happen to save your livestock, what do? You got to truck them someplace.
And in that portion of the film, it shows a bunch of his herd just laying out there burned.
Yeah. Barbecued.
And the poor guy, I mean, he breaks into tears. You just see all your assets gone like that. And then can you imagine going through all that and then somebody's knocking the door saying, "Hey man, can I hunt here?"
Well, and it's not only that, but most of these people have operational loans with a bank. Every winter, we've got Andrew McKeon, the outdoor writer out of Glasgow in the film. And Andrew does some ranching on the side too. He's got a little bit of land outside of Glasgow, and he's been a real voice for conservation and hunting for a long time. And, he talks about his neighbors having very uncomfortable conversations with their bankers every winter. Because, they got to figure out now, if you have a fire comes through, there is no fire insurance that pays to bring all your grass back. So what are you going to do? You got to pay off the loan, and then you got to spend $30,000, $40,000 because a lot of these ranches have fences that were built 100 years ago with wood posts. All those posts burn. And so now what are you going to do? So, I mean, there's some real serious consequences out there for being a steward on the land. And it's not an easy life. And I just want your viewers to understand people. I mean, it's a gut punch when things like this happen, or, whether it be a drought or whether it be hoppers or be a disease. I know there's a lot of concern over brucellosis and, is the transfer between elk and bison and all the stuff that goes on to the point we've got lawsuits. Our governor's suing, BLM and American Prairie over the Grazing Act there. And so, I mean, these are all real issues, and they really have a serious implication for these families every day. And if you had to deal with all these issues and you were working at the grocery store, or you're working for a small manufacturer, or maybe you're a seasonal worker, or maybe you're working at one of our tourist attractions or parks or stuff, if you had to deal with this onslaught of issues, I would say a lot of us probably wouldn't survive because it's that difficult. But the way it does work for these people, for what I've been able to see, Dale, is these people love their land. They care about the wildlife. They care about the traditions. They help each other. When branding goes on, they all travel around and help all their neighbors out. When they're sorting and shipping, they all travel around. In the wintertime, they're checking on each other, making sure the roads are open so that people are okay and they've got power, they've got wood, and people are going to survive. And that is the essence of who we are as Montanans. But again, I hear you guys. I understand what it's like not to have access, and it sucks. But it takes a lot of hard work, and even if you do the hard work, you may not get the access. But we have programs like we feature this 454 program. They've changed the name of it, but a lot of people like to sensationalize it and call this billionaires or bulls for billionaires, and that kind of thing. Well, we've got a 19-year-old gal, who's going on her very first elk hunt, and she was able to go over on one of these ranches and kill an elk, and the ranch hand came out. They were actually licensed outfitters and guides, and they took her out, showed her where the elk were. They stalked up together. She shot this really nice cow elk, and her and her boyfriend filled up the freezer that year. She never, ever would have had that chance if we didn't have a program like that. So we have to think about things. I mean, we want to jump to conclusions, and we want to start throwing things out because maybe we don't have what other people have, whether it be land or access or opportunity. But you have to understand, we're again a little percentage of people out there, and we don't need to fight with each other. Like I said, our ranching families, there's not many of them here in America. Our farming families, not very many of them. There's not very many hunters. There's not very many of us as sportsmen. And so we need to all work together. We need to find those solutions. And I know of one ranch that's owned by out-of-staters that their ranch hand told me that routinely have their gates, their locks shot, or they actually have people putting human excrement, rubbing it all over their locks, their combo locks. That's not
that's
not Montana.
Probably not going to be good for access there.
Yeah. So it's really, really tense. It's a big issue. But I said, we can find solutions to this, but we got to start thinking smart.
Another thing, we're going to take our last break here, and then when we come back, I want to play another clip here that talks about something that a lot of us hunters and fishermen have been talking about. And I think sometimes we forget that the landowner is dealing with this same thing, and that is some predators that have been allowed to go far beyond what everyone said they needed to get to. And we're talking about the grizzly bear. And I want you to, when we come back from this break, talk about the Bradleys and what they dealt with grizzly bears, and that right after this. Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer. Truth is, the Montana Outdoor Podcast wouldn't exist without their incredible support. And if you've been enjoying these episodes each week, maybe it's time to support the folks who help make it happen. So here's the question. Do you need a trailer for work, for hauling gear to your next adventure? Or maybe a new truck bed to help keep your life organized, whether it's for work or play? Well then, go see the folks who already get what you're about. If you listen to this show, you've already got something in common with Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer. Like you, they love the outdoors. They work hard, and they're dang good at what they do. Their job? Helping people like you get your work done faster so you can get back out in Montana's great outdoors. Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer carries a full lineup of Diamond Sea trailers, gooseneck, equipment, dub trailers, well, you name it. Whether you're hauling a few supplies or towing the big stuff, Diamond Sea trailers are built to handle it all with reliability and ease. They also carry CM truck beds, the strongest, most durable truck beds around. Plus, they service everything they sell. Need your trailer rewired so the lights work the way they're supposed to? They'll take care of that too. Got a new truck? They'll get you set up with the accessories you need, installed and ready to roll. And don't wait until the last minute to schedule your trailer service. Do that ahead of time so your gear's ready to go when you are. They also stock a huge selection of parts for Boss snowplows, CM truck beds, and Diamond Sea trailers. And if it's not in stock, they'll find it. Need financing? Well, they've got you covered there, too. Need a gooseneck or fifth wheel hitch for that rodeo trip or family outing to the great outdoors? Yep, they install those, too. Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer. They're in Missoula at 5680 Expressway. You can call them at 406-549-4243 or check them out online at rmtte.com. That's Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer, rmtte.com. Now let's get back to what Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer helped create, the podcast. Back here on the Montana Outdoor Podcast, Tom Opre, my guest, and I have been in just a fascinating conversation. It all got started by this wonderful film that he has out right now called The Real Yellowstone. It's already been around, doing some premieres in different towns around the state, which, by the way, Tom, how are those premieres?
I have to tell you, Dale, yeah, we started in Bozeman last Friday. With our premiere there, we had about between 300 and 350 people there. Great show out, great show up at the Emerson, and then we've screened it in along the High Line here now. So we've gone everywhere from Glasgow all the way over to Cut Bank, and then we actually ended up also in Lewistown. And Lewistown was so off the hook. I mean, all really, really well received, well attended, but Lewistown was so off the hook that we had to add a second screen. Literally, wow. We had 200 people in the one theater. I walked out in the lobby, and Ross Butcher, the county commissioner there, says, "Hey, you need to walk outside, Tom." And in the lobby was packed, and we already had pretty well sat everybody in the theater. And I walked out the door, and the line extended out to the next block. So we were able to get another theater open, another screen, and got everybody in. But that was like 300 people for one showing, so it was really cool. Yeah, so we've got a really cool distribution model. You can go to shepherdsofwildlife.org, and Shepherds has got 2 H's, but if you don't know how to spell Shepherds with 1 H, you'll still get to me because we own that URL too. But at the end of the day, you guys can go there. We've got this film tour. We're going to be traveling around the rest of Montana between now and the end of next month, the end of August. Next week, I'm going to be in Dillon on the 24th. The 25th, I'll be in Salmon, Idaho, just across, just south of the Bitterroot there. And then I'll be in Polson on the 26th, on Saturday the 26th, which is also Cherry Festival in Polson. So it's going to be busy there. And then we pick things back up the 1st of August. I think August, we're going to have to check on this, but 1st of August, first week of August, we're going to be in Billings. We're going to be in a bunch of other locations in eastern Montana. And then we're going to be hitting up Helena, Butte, Missoula, Whitefish.
You're going down to Cody, Wyoming, too, aren't you?
And then late September, we start off in Cody on the 17th, and then we're hoping to get several other cities lined up. I'm literally taking phone calls, PMs, and emails from people that are asking to show this film all over the state of Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, and then all over the West. We're even getting phone calls from Dallas, Pittsburgh, Atlanta. I had a text today from my Congressman Ryan Zinkin. We're talking about trying to do something in DC. This is all important stuff that people need to understand. And but with that tour, we're also going to have a digital cinema event. Not everybody can make it in the movie theater. And as a filmmaker, I want you to watch it on the big screen because that's really, really impressive. And of course, where we live, folks, is one of the most beautiful places in the world. And I will say, Dale, I'm going to get some hate mail from my fellow Montanans. And the hate mail is going to be, Montana is such a beautiful place. And I was so blessed to be able to document some of these incredible places that I'm sure people are going to be mad because I've made the place look too good. But yeah,
But on the other hand, I think a lot of people can be awful proud of it too. But what are folks saying about this when they come out? What are some of the comments that you've got about it after they've watched?
Let me just stop for 1 second though. If you can't get it to theaters, you can go to shepherdsofwildlife.org/The Real Yellowstone. Or just shepherdsofwildlife.org. August 15th, we're going to have a digital cinema event for 30 days. You'll be able to go on and buy a digital cinema ticket. And with that ticket and all of our tickets that we're selling through our website, through shepherdsofwildlife.org, we have a song, a free download to The Land is Like a Lady. It is the theme song that we wrote for the film. Good rancher buddy of mine and drummer Brad Radke, who's also featured in the film. Brad's got some experience writing some music. Obviously, I know how to write, but not music or songs. And so the two of us last January, was sitting in his kitchen in front of the wood stove, and we wrote this song in one day. And I've got a good friend in Nashville, a guy named Nick Hoffman, who was Kenny Chesney's fiddle player for about a dozen years or so, and he's got a television show, outdoor show called Nick's Wild Ride, I think on the Outdoor Channel. And I said, hey Nick, I want to produce this and I want it right. And Nick took a look at it. He said, well, we need to edit the lyrics a little bit here because I was talking earlier in the show about where cow towns go to die. I actually wrote this lyric that says Bose Angeles. No, sorry, Bozeman, but Bose Angeles, where old cow towns go to die. Now, Nick told me nobody's going to know what Bose Angeles means, so we wrote it out. But yeah, the song ended up getting produced this last April in Nashville. We had some great musicians and a great young singer come and do it. And so you'll automatically, with every ticket, get a free download to the song. And we wrote it really, Dale, thinking that it could and has the ability to be the theme song of the modern American rancher. It really epitomizes all the issues that we're talking about in this film, as best we can in a piece of music and a song. But you asked this question, what am I hearing? I have to tell you, overwhelmingly, like 99.999% of people walking out, because I meet with the people, I stand outside, and everyone wants to shake my hand, and it's a lot of thank yous. Like we saw in Scotland with The Last Keeper, these people don't have a voice. And even if they do have one on social media today, they usually get drowned out by the urban masses, right? And all the people. But this type of project gives them a voice that's undeniable. And so the response has been incredibly good. The energy's great. I mean, I'm just getting ready to put another little short video out when we get off of this about the energy and the momentum. We've had 450,000 video views this week on Facebook alone. And it's all because of people that are engaged and interested. And we're trying to raise a little money so that we can go out and promote it. Shepherds of Wildlife is a 501c3. And, if you want to go to shepherdsofwildlife.org and hit our sneak peek button, if you can make a contribution, $1 allows us to reach 50 people out there across the country and across the world. But mostly folks here in America we're trying to reach with this film so that they can be educated, so they can understand what the realities are when it comes to land stewardship and wildlife habitat conservation. So it's been unbelievable. And I have a feeling we're just getting started here, Dale. I mean, I'm fielding phone calls. Yeah. I literally had a meeting with a very serious producer in Hollywood, that friend of a friend here in Montana, and they're taking us to some, Netflix and a few other places to see if we can't get the widest audience possible for this, because it's so important.
I really hope people will do that. You saw on the screen there that the Shepherds of Wildlife website on there, but also whether you got this podcast on Spotify or Amazon or on YouTube, there's a podcast description underneath it. There's a link to that website. So folks, just click on that, make it real easy for you. And that's where you can get the information about how you'll be able to buy a ticket and watch it at home if you can't make one of these premieres. And the schedule's going to be there. I'll have links to all that stuff. So be sure and check that podcast description and hit those links and go watch this. But do try to catch one of the premieres, because I really think you're going to love watching it on the big screen. One of the issues that it gets talked about is the Bradleys were talking about the grizzly bears.
This is our home, and this is our, like I said, God gave us this place to steward. And it would be heartbreaking for all of us to have to leave here. And that is our last option. There are lots of factors working against us that didn't used to be working against people, especially with technology and social media and, all the people that are against doing the things that we do. And then there's the wildlife issues that have gotten worse because of mismanagement.
You raise a calf from birth, you know the cow, you know the bloodline. That animal's supposed to grow your herd, not end up in a grizzly's mouth before it saw its first sunrise. I've buried calves, but what hurts worse is burying your right to protect them. He was lying there, flat out, eating that calf like he's done it before, and I couldn't stop him legally. My hands were tied. That's the part nobody sees, is the helplessness. It ain't about hating bears. I respect them. But we've got no predators out here, no pressure. And when there's no management, man or bear both lose. One becomes a killer, and the other becomes a criminal for trying to protect what's his.
As we consider all those factors, we have to think not necessarily for Peter and I are we going to be able to make it? Probably at this point we're going to survive. But is it worth handing that headache over to our daughter? We're not getting rich here. We're making a living, and that's it. And it's only going to get worse.
Help us bring this story to Congress, classrooms, and conservation leaders worldwide. Every dollar boosts this message. Watch, share, donate, stand with the people of the real Yellowstone.
And here's another ranching family that's been around for a long time. Tell us about that. She got awfully emotional in this, and for good reason. I mean, they're thinking, if we don't get taken out by the environmental groups, we may just not be able to make it. And on top of that, I turn around and the grizzly bear's got another one of her animals. What hit you about that?
That was the very first day we started production on this film. I've been introduced to Trina Bradley. She's a pretty outspoken advocate for ranchers and ranching. And of course, this whole issue with the Endangered Species Act and grizzly bears here in Montana. It's a hot button, right? And she's ground zero. I mean, she's right there on the Rocky Mountain front. They've got a small operation. It's not a real big cow-calf operation. They're right on. As a matter of fact, about a third of their ranch is on the Blackfeet Reservation, so that comes with its own issues. And so the first day I showed up there, we had Fish, Wildlife, and Parks had their bear biologist there with a culvert trap, and the Wildlife Services guy, their agent, had a trap also. So we had 2 culvert traps, and her father runs a ranch down next door to the Boone and Crockett Ranch, just south of her ranch. And we were going out to set these traps because they had 3 calves. Her father had 3 calves killed the previous day by a sow and 2 cubs. And so we got out there, and of course they're using what's left of the calves as bait in these culvert traps. And they parked, and they literally backed these 2 trailers up next to each other to this carcass of this cow, this bull cow, great big bull, dead, laying there on the ground, and had been eaten on for a little while. And I said, "Hey, what happened to the bull?" And they said, "Oh, well, 2 weeks ago it was fine, but we don't know." Well, of course, the bears were feeding on it. So, what people don't really said earlier, these folks get paid once a year as cow-calf operators. In the case of the Bradleys, they're a small operation, and in today's market, which actually, beef prices are about as good as they've been in a long time right now. They weren't this way just 2 years ago, and weren't, when we started on this film, almost half the price of what they are now. But if you're a small operator, and again, I'm just going to give out a number here. I mean, if you got 100 calves on the ground for a year and you sell them for $1,000, $1,200, that's your gross income for the year. It's not hard to figure out the math. Today, it's around $2,000. So it's a big difference there. But if you lose of those 100 calves, 5, 6, 8, 10 of them to predation by grizzly bears, which is their problem. Think about if you have a salary, $100,000 salary, and somebody just takes $20,000 out of your salary. How's that going to impact your life? I mean, it's real, folks. And so, there's a lot of questions that she brings up about conditioning bears and what we need to do so that, we have a scenario where bears, let's face it, they were a prairie animal when Lewis and Clark first came to this part of the world. We forced them, humans forced them up into the mountains, and that's where they've been able to find, some sanctuary from humans. And we've lived them as a hunter myself. I love having bears around, but you have to be respectful of them. And I've been really lucky to hunt bears in Alaska. But at the end of the day, up in Alaska, the bears have been conditioned to humans, literally putting them on the menu. And so they have a tendency. I mean, even our big coastal brown bears, some of these are well over 1,000 pounds. If they smell human scent, they exit stage left. They get the heck out of Dodge. As a matter of fact, the late scientist at Val Geist out of Canada sent me a paper once about how humans can really condition these bears. And of course, he was doing most of his research in British Columbia on sheep in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. And of course, everybody in the woods back then had a gun. They had a hunting season for grizzly bears. And so grizzlies learned real quick to stay away from humans. And even today, we do have some grizzlies that have learned to do that. But we also have grizzlies that pretty well think they're the king of the mountain, right? And we have hunters that are being killed, being maimed. We've got shed hunters, we've got fly fishermen, we've got mountain bikers. And so we've got this human-wildlife conflict. And anytime we have human-wildlife conflict, the wildlife usually is the one who loses. And so, we do know there is some fact that these animals could be conditioned, and we just have to figure out how we're going to get there. And again, I don't think ostracizing bears and trying to make them out to be evil and all stuff, or even wolves for that matter, they all have a place in these ecosystems, and we all want biodiversity because that allows for healthy ecosystems, which allows for us as human beings to live in a healthy environment. But we're at a point now, like I said earlier, we don't have a lot of wildlife habitat everywhere. We've got a lot of people around there, and we're losing habitat all the time all over the world. So what we need to do, from what I can see, is that we just need to be good stewards of the land. We need to make sure we manage these entire ecosystems. And even our urban people understand that. We did a survey, and we found that almost 70% of people in America today that weren't strongly for or against hunting were okay with the management of large predators as long as it had to do with whole ecosystem management. Again, it's just common sense. That's all it is.
Yeah. Well, and management's the key word there.
100%.
And when you look at the information that the FWP is getting from farmers and ranchers, from hunters, from anglers, when we're talking about the grizzly bear and that, they've got a pretty good handle on, okay, they know where they're at, what to do, what's conditioning and what's not and all that. But the federal government is saying, no, sorry, FWP, you don't get to manage them. Now they can manage the herds of deer, everything else. You can't manage them. And that's very frustrating for everybody, because here's all these great folks that really don't want to see the bear gone, but they need to be managed. And so we can all live together with them. And so these are things that I just love, how the film just puts it all out there and lets you kind of decide what's going on. And in fact, one of the ranches, I can't remember off the top of my head here, even has been kind of working with the bear and the wolf, if you will, a bit, to work together to live better together, and have been coming up with some of their own solutions. It's fascinating. And so I don't think very many people, and what I think is going to surprise a lot of you Montanans listening is, I think there's a lot of stuff that you may not even realize that the farmer and rancher is going through right now. Oh, my friends, sorry to stop it there, but I'm going to tell you, this keeps going. It's an incredible discussion, and it gets even deeper, and there's even more surprises. So we're going to pick this up next week. So before I jump out of here, I want to remind you again, go to the podcast description, and you will be able to get a link to the shepherdsofwildlife.org. That's got a bunch of information about Tom. Of course, it's got information about this film, The Real Yellowstone. Then, next week, as most of you know that are regular viewers, and if you're a brand new viewer, welcome, and thanks for doing that. But the way this works is we always drop a new podcast every Saturday morning. I drop it into YouTube at 6 a.m. every Saturday morning. So you don't have to get up that early. You can watch it anytime after 6 a.m. next Saturday. And of course, I'm talking about Saturday, the 26th of July. The podcast you're watching right now dropped on the 19th. Of course, they're always up there forever and ever, so you can catch it anytime on YouTube. For those of you that are audio listeners, same goes for you. You can always get a link at our website, montanooutdoor.com, and you can pick it up next week starting on the 26th. So I hope you'll keep watching, because this really gets into some stuff. I'm going to play more clips of the film and all that, but I really hope you'll take some time to watch the whole film, buy a ticket if you can, donate some more, and just be part of this, because these are discussions, whether you're an angler, you're a hunter, whether you're a farmer, a rancher, whether you're somebody that doesn't do anything but just loves the outdoors in Montana, or maybe you live somewhere else in the United States or some other country that I know we've got a ton of you that watch from all different countries. So it affects anybody that wants to come to Montana, that loves the wildlife in Montana, eats meat. The list goes on. This is not an impossible thing to figure out, but it's going to take all of us to do it. And we got to stick together on this and work on it. But Tom brought some very interesting discussions, and we're going to cover a lot more. So until then, next Saturday, thanks so much for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe, like, all the things you always get when you watch YouTube. We don't say that to bug you. It's just, it helps us out a lot and allows us to keep going. And also remember our great sponsors too, Superior Hardwoods of Montana and Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer. They have been just incredible supporters of this podcast. And so anytime you need anything like that, go see them. They are amazing folks, both at Superior Hardwoods and Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer. I can't thank them enough for what they do for this podcast. All right, gang, we'll see you soon here on the Montana Outdoor Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Montana Outdoor Podcast. It has been brought to you in part by Superior Hardwoods of Montana, home of the largest selection of in-stock, high-end wood products and flooring in the western United States. Let them guide you through the woods at superior-hardwoods.com. And by Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer in Missoula, home of Boss Snowplows, CM Truck Beds, and Diamond Sea Trailers. Just go to rmtte.com for more information. So what did you think of today's podcast? Send your questions and comments to downrigger at montanooutdoor.com. We should be dropping a new podcast this next Saturday. Until then, we will see you soon out in Montana's great outdoors.